What? Sure. Yeah, that's a solution, I guess. What? The bot that just barely made it, and then the Reaper that just got their toes stubbed.
Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, we're playing healers, and thanks to the common need for a lot of healers for 4-man content, that's mainly the content we got. Oh yeah, this also took place like the day before the Mockdome event before 7.5. Now then, for duty 1, we went to Lunar Subterrane as White Mage. Due to the way the tank was pulling, an interesting topic came up once again. Wall-to-wall pulls. All the way to the wall, or just to the final pack? There are upsides and downsides to both methods, but part of the reason why to the last mob is the generally prevailing method is due to it having more upsides and less downsides of the two. For ending on the last pack, the party can start blasting at full capacity almost immediately once the chasing pack has caught up, and the tank can focus on rounding up the mobs right where they are. Additionally, due to it being the more common pulling method, parties are more likely to expect this method. The main downsides of To the Last Pack is first that after the pull, you will have a longer distance to walk to the next pull. This is sometimes not really a downside, since it just means you spent a bit more time of cooldown recharging while running anyway. Furthermore, if you don't know the dungeon, without running all the way up to the wall, you might miss a pack due to how frequently at times additional packs just pop in as you approach. So an empty hallway isn't even a clear indicator that you got everything. For pulling all the way to the wall, the main upsides strongly mirror the other method. You have less distance to run after the pull, and by running all the way, you are certain you got everything you could. The downsides are more severe, however. Some jobs cannot start their attack proper until you stop moving the mobs. If you have a worse than stellar latency, many jobs can't reliably attack at all while the mobs are moving. And because this method is the less common, players seeing you run further than usual may be more likely to hold their cooldowns until you stop. Meaning that the time you save by running up to the wall during the pull instead of after is saved, quote-unquote, by being punched in the back while your team is waiting for you to stop. An additional side note is also that somewhat frequently, if a dungeon has ranged mobs that won't chase to melee range, they tend to be in the last pack in nearer duties, which can make all the way to the wall more inconvenient. Yet another side is that in rare cases, pulling up to the wall can make mobs bunch up more reliably, which can be a good thing. That said, I'd argue the truly most effective pulling approach would be a slight mix of the two. Pull to the last pack and fight the mobs there. Once the pull is nearing its end, the tank starts dragging what remains towards the wall. This tends to be a lot more consistently effective on pulls where 2-minute bursts are not available, since it means the pack drags out a bit longer. Now, aside from this tangent about wall-to-wall pulling techniques, this duty went okay. On the first boss, both of our DPS get hit by avoidable damage, which leads to one of them dying to raid-wide damage due to me not expecting it to do that much damage. On the second boss, they also get hit by some mechanics, but thankfully don't die. On the final boss, while no one died, things did get spicy and the fight dragged on long enough for the middle safe spot version of the splitting orbs mechanic to come up. For duty 2, we went to Vanguard and the tank knew me. Hello! On the first pull, I ended up using Rescue to reposition our tank because they were completely missing a ranged mob that was just bashing away at me. Aside from this, the duty actually went quite well. I think the only significant outlier was that the Black Mage was running an AoE rotation that features High Fire 2 and High Blizzard 2, but you know, that is at least a somewhat intuitive way to AoE on Black Mage. Oh yeah, and on the last AoE pull, the ranged mob there tripped up the tank again. But just speaking from my more recent experiences with Vanguard, a party only having a few minor things stand out, and beyond that just being a solid run, is very surprising. For duty 3, we went to Castrum Abania with a solid group. This dungeon specifically has some interesting parts you can optimize. The first one is the rooms with the pods. As a white mage, getting into the center of the room for SIs to hit all 4 is a good start, and applying arrows to each of them also helps. Focusing on a pod in the opposite end of where your melees go can also increase your chances of getting all of the pods down before they deploy. However, the random optimization is that if you cannot break a pod before it deploys, not attacking it in the first place is the most effective thing you can do, since the mob comes up with full health regardless. This tip mostly helps if you have the damage to break 3 pods if you prioritize, but not 4. But on the second set of pods, more mobs come in during the deployment, so knowing the last pod is out of reach could indirectly save time by fighting the other mobs instead. Another bit of weird optimization comes in the form of the second boss. Each time the boss crouches down, it suffers from a temporary vulnerability debuff, making it take extra damage, which I believe comes up after it uses a serial magic. If your cooldowns line up for it, you could use them during this specific window, although the window is only around 10 seconds and I'm not sure how impactful it is, so unless you just have to hold a couple of seconds, it probably makes little sense to coordinate around it. For duty 4, we went to Vanguard again, this time as Scholar, and this tank also had some odd issues with repositioning the ranged mobs throughout the duty due to wanting them somewhere else than where they start the fight. The red mage also had some oddities, including acceleration ticking out during a boss fight, getting procs from the thunder over arrow during AoE pulls, stepping out in the goop during certain boss fights. The ninja also got hit by mechanics here and there, although them having a sprout icon still could mean a few things, including them simply being an alt, or that they proc through the game very efficiently. Either way, despite these mechanical issues and rotational issues, the run was not that much slower than an average run, and we didn't even have any deaths. For duty 5, we went to Stigma Dreamscape with a tank that knew me. Again, hello! The last boss has a couple of interesting mechanics to talk about, one in regards to cheese, and the other just in regards to the tell for the mechanic. The Omega Frame and the Hybrid Dragons that enter the arena each will perform one mechanic, a half room or a wide cone. After that, they walk up and auto-attack a couple of times and then self-destruct. The intended solution is of course to kill them before they explode, but the damage of the self-destruct is actually low enough that mitigating and using barriers for it can block the damage entirely. And if you do, you don't even receive vuln stacks. But even if you do get vuln stacks, properly dodging the rest of the mechanics make the vuln stacks sort of irrelevant. That said, you gain so little damage from ignoring them that it is only really worth it if everyone is in on ignoring them and letting them explode. The other mechanic worth talking about is the pillars. The tall pillar means circle AoE, while the wide ribbon means donut. Keep in mind that later in the fight the boss will overlap one of these with a forced march in a random direction. For duty 6, we went to Meso Terminal with Rust and a tank that knew me. Sure, a lot of tanks that recognize me today. This time, let's talk a bit about the first boss. Aside from those rather in-your-face visual mechanics like the knockbacks and circle AoEs, the Tank Buster is a mechanic that can sometimes sneak up on you. Not only does it do reasonably high damage for a dungeon boss, but it also applies a dot that is removable with Ishuna. Of course, you could simply heal through it, but if the tank took the Tank Buster straight with no mitigation, the dot tends to do enough damage that it can become a mild issue. What matters here is that dots applied by enemy attacks also snapshot, so if you take the Tank Buster with no mitigation and then use mitigation afterwards, it doesn't do anything against the dot damage, whereas if you use mitigation for the Tank Buster, even if your mitigation runs out during the dot, its damage is reduced for the full duration. That said, if the dot ends up hurting a ton as a healer, you might as well use Ishuna. Even better, if there is a bard, they can pretty much nullify this mechanic altogether, if they remember to. We of course didn't have a bard here, but the duty went quite well just the same. For duty 7, we went to Tam-Tara Deepcroft as Sage. Dungeons at this level are always awkward as Sage, since you don't have any instant casts, so for bigger pulls, you just kinda walk with the team for the most part. Granted, compared to Scholar, all they have is Bio 1, which is not that much stronger than low-level Doses 1. But at least it is something you can set up while running. Despite this, we still rush through the dungeon very quickly. Remember, using Diagnosis is perfectly fine when you need it. For duty 8, we went to Porta Decumana, and this one, as usual, went just fine. As a Sage, as long as your party isn't taking a lot of avoidable damage, you can, with some careful planning, do the whole fight while never using healing spells. The main things you need to do that is first making sure to move Cardia around as necessary, and second, to recognize that all players recover 1% of their max HP every 3 seconds, so you can get away with healing less by making use of passive regen. Getting maximum value out of Physis and your Ryukolis also helped a ton, and considering Cardia helps, Soteria will too, of course. As necessary, Cardia can be moved in between GZDs every 2 or 3 casts. For duty 9, we went to Towered Paradigm's Breach. Again, wow. We were an almost instant replacement, and a machinist in one of the other alliances also knew me. Ilana also joined in to replace the other healer that left our alliance, and due to being late, we just had to watch the whole first boss. Thankfully, the other alliances helped keep ours alive while we were too far away to help. Although, there were moments where it got so far down to the wire that most of our party was dead. On Hansel and Gretel, we had a death here and there to players so excited to attack that they managed to die to the damage reflect on the shield. At the same time though, one of the tanks never turned the shield boss towards the raid, which did mean white mages and dancers, if we had any of those, would be taking extra unnecessary damage. Not to mention, almost every single mechanic led to at least one dead player, whether that was due to not running out of the line AoE fast enough, not noticing where the attack goes, just ignoring the saw blades closing in on you and killing you, or something completely different. Despite that, the deaths were spaced out enough that it didn't really become an issue. Somewhat similarly on the Red Girl, we saw deaths to almost every single major mechanic in the fight, which also led to an extended fight. One standout mechanic that always catches some players is Child's Play, which is the one where the boss puts out a bunch of dark circles for AoEs and then use chains to force march players in a direction. The fact the forced march moves you like about half the arena in length tends to catch players off guard, especially when they try to avoid the circles first. The strongest sign in this run that we were getting longer fights due to the sheer amount of deaths, at least to me, was the second round of rotating Cone AoE girls, the one where she uses chains to move them around midway through. Usually it doesn't come up, but it did this time. An interesting detail to this mechanic is that there are spots with no rotating girl, so you could just go there when they shuffle around. Or alternatively, that spot could be under the boss sometimes. Despite how many problems we had with other bosses in this run, we actually got halfway through the second phase of the final boss before anyone died to that boss in general. Only for Alliance B to quickly get in so much trouble that they actually used Healer LB3. But that was also enough for them to stabilize enough for us to take home the clear. And finally for duty 10, we went to Copperbell Mines as Astrologian. Sure, we don't have any cards, but Astrologian is completely busted at this level, with by far the strongest dot, access to light speed, as well as essential dignity. So we rush through the dungeon about as quickly as we can, reaching a boss every 2.5 minutes. Compared to the other healers, White Mage and Sage have slightly stronger filler attacks than Astrologian, but no way to spam them almost endlessly while moving. And Astrologian's dot is way more potent than even White Mage's arrow. The only time where a different healer overtakes Astrologian at this level is if the tank pulls so much that constantly spamming Benefic becomes necessary, as at that point, Scholar spamming Physic alongside their fairy is probably more helpful. But I'm actually not sure if any of these low-level dungeons have pulls big enough to warrant that in the first place. Yet another set of just 10 duties. That is sort of how it goes with healers due to what kind of duties tend to lag healers. With me starting to look ahead to hope of finishing the 2000 Mentor Roulettes before year end, I realized that 10 duties a week simply won't cut it. But that's my headache. For now, we passed 4257th on the achievement. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, the trait Hyper Lightspeed used to work differently. Back in Stormblood, it initially reduced the cooldown of Lightspeed by 5 seconds when you crit healed with Benefic 1 or 2. This was quickly changed to instead be 10 seconds whenever Essential Dignity was used. With a cooldown of 2 minutes to Dignity's 40 seconds, this effectively meant roughly 30 seconds less per 2 minutes, which explains why, early in Shadowbringers, they changed the trait to just reduce the cooldown to 90 seconds as is.